lot of you are wondering what the heck is a mullet setup, who benefits from it, and should I be looking at this? So we're gonna dive into all those details, see if it's just a fad or if it's something that you truly can benefit from. So stay tuned, we're gonna go into a little bit of a quick history lesson, and then I'm gonna tell you how it worked out for us and what benefits I saw. It's mail time, boys and girls. Who does that? Who really does this? Do not open the blade. What are we doing? What's up, everybody? My name is Silas. In the last couple weeks, we've been testing out the biggest bicycle industry trend of 2021, the mullet setup, to see if it's all that it's hyped up to be. Now, if right now you're picturing Billy Ray Cyrus, that is not what we're talking about. So stay tuned, you're gonna wanna hear this. This could be a potential game changer for a lot of you. Let's get into it. Let's rewind a bit. This is my son, Oliver. He's learned a lot these last few years riding bikes, and I'd argue that his skills have outpaced his size. What can I say? He's got my genetics, so he's just not going to be the tallest kid out there. But this spring, we upgraded him to a Norco Sight trail bike with 29-inch wheels. For a kid that's only about 5 feet tall, the wheels are absolutely massive, and a few people thought I was crazy putting him on a 29er. But as a parent, actually paying for bikes and trying to make this bike last a few years, I felt the 29er would get him well into his teenage years. It also really helped him gain the confidence to ride through more rocky and technical terrain this spring, which has opened up a ton of trails for him that he just couldn't have ridden on his old 24-inch bike. But the big wheels do present a few challenges for smaller riders. The first is that there's just less tire clearance. So for riders trying to get over the back of the bike, and we saw this with Oliver, it's really hard to get over the back of such a big wheel. And on top of that, with Oliver's bike, what we ran into was that when his seat was dropped and he bottomed out the suspension, the seat actually made contact with the rear tire. Now the second, and I would say most important problem that we ran into is just that the extra weight of those wheels made it really hard for Oliver to get the bike leaned over into corners. And I think this is something that most smaller riders on 29ers and also less aggressive riders on 29ers experience, is that it just feels like the bike wants to go in a straight line and it doesn't want to lean over into corners. Now, if you pay much attention to the mountain bike racing world, you've probably heard people talking about mullet setups. It's kind of a terrible name, but basically what it refers to is a larger front wheel and a smaller rear wheel, typically a 29-inch front and a 27.5 rear wheel. It's been inspired from the motorcycle racing world, where motorcycles have historically always had a bigger front wheel and a smaller rear wheel, but now in the last few years we've seen a lot of people adopting it for downhill mountain bike racing and even enduro racing. Now let's go way back to 2004 when Specialized launched the Big Hit, and that bike was really the first mainstream bike to ever be launched with mixed wheel sizes. And this bike had a 26-inch front wheel and a 24-inch rear wheel, and it was kind of a slope style free ride bike. It was kind of in this weird niche that not many people were buying bikes in that category. And a few years later, in 2007, Trek launched what they called the 69er, and it was a hardtail with a 29-inch front wheel and a 26-inch rear wheel. Both of those bikes were kind of fad bikes and just kind of fizzled out. They were standalone bikes in their line, they didn't really fit anywhere, and they were a little bit odd. So they didn't last long, they died off, and that was the end of mixed wheel sizes for a while. It wasn't until 2019 that the UCI, who governs international mountain bike racing, made it legal to race mountain bikes with mixed wheel sizes. Once that happened, we saw every World Cup team jump on the opportunity to start testing different wheel sizes on their downhill bikes. Since then, we've seen the majority of World Cup downhill teams moving over to this mullet setup on their race bikes with a 29-inch front wheel and a 27.5 rear wheel. And the reason for that is that they're getting the rollover ability and the traction of that 29-inch front wheel, which is so critical, but they're getting the nimbleness and the tire clearance of that smaller 27.5 rear wheel. On top of that, there's a side benefit that that smaller rear wheel is a little bit lighter, so it accelerates faster, and it's also a little bit more durable because it has less leverage working against it. Another major reason why we're seeing these kind of bikes becoming more popular now is tires. There are two things with tires that have changed in the last decade. One is the availability of tires in two different wheel sizes. We've seen so many different brands adopt 27.5-inch wheels as well as 29-inch wheels that now there's a huge selection of tires in both sizes. On top of that, in the last decade, tubeless tires have become mainstream, so we don't see inner tubes being used in bikes nearly as much as we used to. Because of this, you can have two different wheel sizes and trust that your tubeless tires hopefully will hold up and you don't have to worry about carrying two different size tubes in your pack. So when I saw Oliver struggling a little bit to fit on his new 29-inch bike, I did what any bike-obsessed dad would do, and I swapped out his 29-inch rear wheel for a smaller 27.5 wheel. Once we had his bike converted over to this mullet setup, it was time to test it out and see if there was any truly noticeable difference. Now, a quick side note, there are a lot of bikes out there now being designed around a 29-inch front wheel and a 27.5 rear wheel. A true mullet bike has been engineered and designed in this way. What we're doing is taking a full-blown 29er, designed around 29-inch front and rear wheels, and we're swapping in that smaller 27.5 rear wheel. We're knowing full well that when we do this, we're dropping the bottom bracket height, the pedals will be a little closer to the ground, and all of the angles will be a little bit more slack because we're lowering the rear end of the bike. That's okay, it's not a drastic difference, but we're gonna test it out and see how that works out so that you know if you could convert your existing 29er and maybe see some benefit from it. So Oliver's been riding this mullet setup on his bike now for about 3 weeks, and from following him on the trails before and after, I can say without a doubt I've seen a remarkable change in his riding just from changing this wheel out. The biggest difference I've seen is that he's just able to get the bike leaned over into corners. Before, the bike wanted to stand up, it wanted to go straight, and it didn't want to lean over. You could tell he was really fighting the bike to get it leaned over. Part of this is probably because he's pretty light. He's under 100 pounds. I can't say I've seen a huge difference anywhere else. It's really the corners where he's had a big change in his riding. So the question most of you are asking is who can really benefit from having this mullet setup? And I'd say there's a couple people on totally different ends of the spectrum who could maybe benefit from this. The first is smaller or less aggressive riders. Riders like Oliver who just need their bike to be able to be a little bit more nimble. So if you have a 29-inch bike and you're having a really hard time getting it to lean into corners or getting it to go exactly where you want on the trail, this could actually really benefit you to switch over to this mullet setup. And the second group of people who could really benefit from this mullet setup are more aggressive, playful riders. Riders who like to jump, riders who like to go to bike parks, things like that. You can see some benefit from this as well because your bike will feel more nimble, more like a 27.5 bike, but you'll still get that rollover of the 29-inch front wheel. So who is this mullet setup not for? I would say if you're over 6 feet tall, or you're a cross-country racer, or if you just like to go as fast as possible and you don't feel like your cornering is suffering in any way, I would say stick with a 29-inch wheel front and back and don't worry about going to this mullet setup. So thanks for dropping in. Hope you found this useful or at least entertaining. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel so you see all of our content. And if you plan to convert your bike to a mullet setup soon, drop me a note down in the comments. Love to hear from you. See you at the next video. Peace.